I am Arceon of the Taygetan Academies. I speak to you through this transmission line from the Celestial Alliance, and I begin, as the Taygetan method always begins, not with comfort, not with ceremony, but with structure, with the architecture of the question itself. This transmission arrives in a specific window of the galactic calendar, a window the Taygetan archives have marked for this precise category of disclosure, a category concerning something so fundamental to the construction of human identity that it has been present in your awareness every day of your life without being recognized for what it is. The archives designated this window because the frequency environment now reaching your planet has opened, for the first time in a significant period, the receiver capacity in the awakening population that this particular layer of information requires. You could not have received this correctly in an earlier window. This is the correct window. That is why this transmission is arriving now. The question I have been sent to address is this. You have been carrying something since before you could form a single coherent thought about who you are. Before you had language, before you had memory, before you could look in a mirror and begin the long project of constructing an identity, a sequence of sounds was assigned to you. That sequence was pressed into the world before you could consent to it or refuse it. And from that moment forward, the world has been calling to you using that sequence. Every day of your life, without exception. You have answered to a name that was selected for you before you existed as a conscious choosing being. And almost no one, in the entirety of a human life, ever stops to ask the question now forming in your field as you receive this. Where did that name come from? Not its dictionary definition. Not which family member it honored, which culture carried it, which century softened its consonants into the form you inherited. Those are surface answers to a surface question. I am asking about the architecture beneath the architecture, the origin before the origin, the layer of the cosmic record that predates every historical civilization, every linguistic convention, every cultural tradition that transmitted the name you carry to the hands that gave it to you. The Taygetan archives have a specific answer, and that answer is what this transmission is for. Let me establish a central image before I enter the historical record. This image will return at 2 more points in what follows, each time carrying a different layer, and it will be resolved in the closing. Receive it now as a working framework. A watermark is pressed into paper at the moment of its creation. It is invisible in ordinary light. The eye passes over it without awareness. You can read the page, handle it, fold it, set it aside for decades, and the watermark will remain there, unseen, in every moment. But hold the page up to a source of light positioned behind it, and the original pattern becomes visible, clear, precise, unmistakable. The signature of whoever made the paper, the specific design pressed into its structure at the moment of its formation. The watermark does not degrade with age. It does not fade with handling. It is not on the surface of the paper. It is in the structure of what the paper fundamentally is. Your name is a watermark. It was pressed into the frequency fabric of your civilization and into something more specific that I will address before this transmission closes. At a moment that predates anything in your linear historical record, by an intelligence that understood what sound is and what sound does, not metaphorically, architecturally. The ordinary light of daily life passes over it continuously without seeing it. You write it on forms, introduce yourself with it, answer when it is called, and the watermark remains invisible, not because it is faded, but because the light source being used cannot reveal it. This transmission is a different light source. By the time this broadcast concludes, your instrument's relationship to your name will have restructured. I am not promising a mystical experience. I am describing a mechanical consequence. Understanding changes the receiver. The receiver then reads the same field differently. Understanding restructures the instrument. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics. Now, let us enter the historical record. The Taygetan archives are organized by frequency event, by moments in the cosmic record when something significant occurred in the interaction between galactic consciousness and the Earth field. What I am accessing for this transmission is designated the Naming Epoch section, a cluster of entries spanning what your linear timeline would place as an extraordinarily long period, beginning in the early seeding epoch of Earth and extending through the foundation of the earliest civilizations your historians currently recognize. What those records show is not mythology. I say this specifically because the temptation, when encountering material of this nature, is to categorize it immediately as the beautiful story that ancient cultures told about the divine origin of language, as narrative, as meaning-making, not as record. That categorization is not entirely wrong, but it is incomplete. The cultural myths of virtually every early human civilization carry a consistent memory. Names were given by divine beings, the divine naming act, the sacred word breathed into the world by intelligence beyond human origin. That memory was not invented. It was remembered, distorted by millennia of cultural translation, fragmented by the gradual withdrawal of direct galactic contact, partially preserved and partially transformed by the traditions that carried it. But the memory was of something real. In the early seeding epoch, and I will not assign a specific numerical date, because the Taygetan record does not index by your calendar system, and because converting its temporal architecture into your linear chronology produces figures that would strain the credibility of this transmission without adding meaningful understanding. In that epoch, the developing human populations of Earth operated in a mode the archives describe as resonance primary consciousness. The dominant intelligence of that period was not verbal sequential reasoning. It was something older, the direct capacity to read frequency, to know the quality of a person, a place, a situation, not through analysis but through immediate felt contact. That capacity was, in specific respects, more sophisticated than what replaced it, more direct, more accurate at its primary function. But it carried a structural limitation that galactic emissaries working with developing civilizations understood well. Resonance primary intelligence could not transmit its specific contents across generations with precision. The felt knowledge of one generation could not be reliably handed to the next in a form that preserved its accuracy. It needed a carrier that could maintain structural integrity across time. Sound became that carrier. Specifically, designed sound, intentional sound, vibrational sequences constructed by intelligence that understood what sound does to consciousness, not as metaphor, but as architecture. The galactic emissaries who facilitated this development in early Earth human populations were representatives of the Galactic Federation operating through the civilization support function that has been recorded across every early human tradition as the Teachers, the Watchers, the Shining Ones. They worked with the acoustic dimension of consciousness with a precision that your current era of science is only beginning to approach from its own direction. These emissaries introduced, through events the archives designate as naming transmission windows,